You have been creating flashcards wrong your entire life. That's right. I also thought I was a flashcard whiz. But as soon as I got to college, everything changed. I noticed that my flashcards were not giving me nearly the same output as I got in high school. By changing the way I saw flashcards, I was able to reduce the time I needed to study by an insane amount. Through watching all the parts of this video series on Anki, I believe the same thing can happen to you. What is up, YouTube? My name is Aiden Helfont. I am a freshman Cornell University student who makes videos on life advice as well as learning and fitness. Today we're going to be talking about how to make more effective flashcards. In the first part of this video series on Anki, I went into depth on why flashcards were so effective in the first place. Make sure you watch that part before this one, as it explains why flashcards are so good in the first place. I will first start by talking about the golden rule of creating flashcards. I will then give some actionable advice on my best tips for creating better flashcards. In this video series, I will not explain the actual logistics behind using the Anki software in the first place. This is because I know my limits and I am not a coder. If you want to see a fantastic course that goes into depth on using the Anki software, check out Ali Abdal's Skillshare class on learning anything with flashcards, the ultimate guide to Anki. The golden rule of flashcards. The best rule I have ever learned about flashcards is to always ask yourself one question before making a flashcard. Is this an examinable fact that I have to memorize and can't just use my understanding for? So many people get stuck in the beginner's mistake of making flashcards out of everything in the lecture slides or talk. The problem is that this will cause your Anki deck to become overwhelming. Logging into Anki, you will go into shock once you realize you have 500 cards to review in one day. There is no point in making flashcards if you don't do them in the first place. Best tips for creating better flashcards. Tip number 1. First understand and then memorize. You must understand the material before using flashcards to memorize it. The problem with flashcards is that they take the information out of context with the larger whole. You need to understand how every single flashcard fits into the greater picture. Just memorizing empty and solo pieces of information will do nothing to help you on an exam. Start by reading the textbook and watching any videos that you need to before studying flashcards more heavily. Tip number 2, focus on the foundation. One of the essential rules for flashcards and life in general is to keep in mind the Pareto principle. The Pareto principle states that 80% of the outputs come from 20% of the inputs. Say you wanted to study 10 hours for a big exam. If you spent just 2 hours studying the broadest 80% of the content, you would probably do reasonably well on the exam. If you wanted to raise your score of 80% to 100%, however, you would have to spend a much more significant proportion of time studying to get just 20% higher of a grade. The same concept comes into making flashcards. Don't make flashcards on every single part of the lecture. Instead, make them on what will most likely come up for a test. We have other and better things to do than worry about getting perfect scores on every single exam. It's incredible how many people forget this fact. Tip number 3, a simple card is almost always better. When I first started making Anki flashcards, I thought stuffing as much information on one card was the best approach to learning the most information as fast as possible. The problem with making flashcards this way is it allows us to fall victim to the exposure effect. The exposure effect makes us think we know something based on how many times we're exposed to it. When we have so much information on one card, we can start to feel as if we know all of the information on it, even though we only generally know small portions. The rule I stick to is to try and keep every flashcard to a max of 3 facts or pieces of information. Even that is pushing it. Tip number 4, use images and photos. Our brain is much better at remembering images and photos as opposed to straight sentences and paragraphs. We can take advantage of this fact by populating our flashcards with them in Anki. Use the photos from the lecture slides or even random images found on the internet. You can also get the image occlusion add-on for Anki, which makes this even more effective. This add-on allows you to take any picture and make flashcards out of various parts by blocking out sections of the images. When they come up in your review sessions, they will require you to actively recall what was under the box before flipping it over. Tip number 5, don't be afraid to edit or delete flashcards. Your Anki skills will get better as time goes on. This means old flashcards might not stand the test of time. However, there's nothing wrong with editing or changing flashcards when going through them in your review sessions. They might not make sense to your future self, or they might have incorrect information. It doesn't matter as long as you change them to work for the future. Tip number 6, closed deletions are your best friend. In my opinion, and the opinion of many other Anki users, closed deletions are the best type of Anki flashcards. Closed deletions are flashcards that hide a particular word or couple of words from view and ask you to fill in the blank. I think these are the best flashcard type because of how easy they are to make. You can copy and paste sentences or important definitions from your professor's lecture slides and take out a word of your choice. Basic flashcards might be slightly more effective for long-term memory, but the ease at making closed deletions flashcards make them my favorite type. Tip number 7, use mnemonic devices. Mnemonic devices are an easy way to make your flashcards much easier to remember. One of my favorite ways to use them is by integrating wordplay into my flashcards. For instance, here's a flashcard on the different sexual stages of child development according to Sigmund Freud. Now, it would be tough to remember all of these stages flat out. Normally, I wouldn't advise having one flashcard contain 5 pieces of information, but this is an exception because of how well the wordplay works here. Orcas anally phalicking latent genitalia. Tell me that doesn't create quite the image in your head. I probably see this flashcard every month and remember it perfectly every time because of this simple wordplay. Use this strategy in your flashcards and you will see the power of mnemonics. Tip number 8, make your own flashcards. Making your own flashcards instead of using preset decks has a number of advantages. Everyone words things differently in their brain. Someone else's flashcard will probably make no sense to you if you have never seen it before. Of course, we're trying to make them as easy to understand as possible, but this is not always possible. By making your own flashcards, you ensure that you'll probably understand the flashcard when it comes up again at a later date. Tip number 9. Create flashcards during class. Most people I know like to create incredibly in-depth notes during their lecture class. They then take these notes and create flashcards out of them. Why not take the intermediary step out of the equation? If we're creating notes to make flashcards out of, why don't we just develop flashcards in the first place? Most of the time, lectures are there not to teach us the information, but to tell us precisely what is essential for the test. The perfect time to make flashcards. It would be best if you had a rough idea of what the professor will talk about before walking into your lecture class. I have saved myself ridiculous amounts of time and effort by making flashcards during class instead of afterward. You can do the same. If you made it this far, you clearly care about improving how you study. I can't tell you enough how much using Anki flashcards has changed the way I learn. I have way more time to hang out with friends, attend club activities, read, and work on my YouTube channel / blogging website. By following the tips outlined in this video and others in the series, you can do the same. To get more information on studying more effectively, check out my video on 8 tips to study more effectively in college and top 3 tips to learn things super fast in college. As always, I hope you have a fantastic day, and bye-bye!